Our podcast is on, and our today's guest, Constantin Buschmann, is the owner of the legendary brand, Brabus. So Konstantin, I want to start with the most exciting and the newest of what's happening in your life. You just premiered a new car.
Yes, about 3 days ago I was still in Como, Italy. So first of all, it's a pleasure to be here in Azerbaijan.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for the invitation. We just premiered our newest car, the Brabus Bodo, in Como, Italy, and Monaco before that. Is here. Journey that started in the mind of one man decades ago is now complete. This is Bodo. It's I think it's a brand new era for the brand. It's an exciting project, and to be honest, I love the car. I personally think it's one of the most beautiful things we've ever designed. And I can't wait to drive it on the road, because until now I've only been able to drive it around the factory at 4 o'clock in the morning, because of course it was secret. But now it's out there. I'm super happy that the reactions online are very positive.
Well, you had 2.5 billion impressions once the pictures came out.
There was a lot of things going on.
I don't think there's any car premiered with that much exposure.
There was a lot of things happening after COVID.
Unbelievable.
I was very overwhelmed by the exposure.
My personal opinion, I think it looks stunning. I think that's a car that should have been made years ago. It looks super futuristic, but yet it's got its style, its DNA of the Brabus brand, and I think it should only be made in black.
I mean, to me, honestly, yes. I mean, every time we publish something, it's a design project. We think about what's good for the brand, but in this case, I have to say it's also very personal, a very, very personal story. And the release was a very personal moment for me, because the name Brabus Bodo, that was the name of my father. And I took over the business 8 years ago from him after he unfortunately suddenly passed away too early. He was 62 at the time. We worked together for a long time. The speech that I gave in Como and Monaco, and the title of the whole event, was One More Thing. Because my father, had always talked to me about this project. There was always this one more car that he dreamed about. It was a big coupe, very present. We call it attitude forward, something that essentially, it looks fast when it stands still, but it's also fast when it's driving. And he never got to finish that project. So
what would he think of the final result? What do you think?
Now, we worked on it for years. I remember the first meetings after I had taken over the business in crisis mode, and I didn't know at the time where we would go and if I would be able to lead the business into the future. But even in those first meetings, we talked about this specific car. And seeing it now, it feels like the end of a chapter and the beginning of a new chapter at the same time.
How many are going to be made?
First question before that, I think he would be. I hope that I always say that I hope that he's sitting on the cloud somewhere up there, looking down and saying, "You are exactly as crazy as I was back in the days." So something's changed, but I think the courage you have to have in business to do new things never changes, and I think he would love it.
Amazing.
Yeah. We will make 77 pieces of the
77 pieces only. So when your father started this almost 50 years ago, and it was supposed to make, the idea was to upgrade the Mercedes in terms of performance and customization and make it luxury. When did you realize what your father is doing and what Brabus is? At what age?
It's interesting. I mean, people say that today, but the story in the beginning, of course, was not that easy. My father grew up in and around the shop of my grandfather, the same as I grew up later and actually learned to walk in my father's workshop. And so my grandfather had a car dealership selling new cars, used cars. And my father would be working there part-time. And he was a fan of sports cars, Porsche in particular. And my grandfather, however, was trading mainly with Mercedes cars, which at the time were known for their quality. And so the cars that my father had access to were Mercedes cars. And so he started working on those. And he tried to make them more individual. He tried to make them sportier, and he tried to, change things on the cars to fit his taste, because he believed that there was customers out there, and it was just a scene that was just emerging. There was not, things like the individualization megatrend that we have.
We're
today.
in the 80s now.
We're in the 70s.
70s.
So the official founding date of Brabus is 1977. And today, of course, the best known examples are that you can customize your Nike shoe, you can customize your computer at Dell. Mass customization is a thing, individualization is a mega trend. That, not even the vocabulary, all of that didn't exist in the 70s. Putting a different steering wheel in a car was considered
the top level of customization.
Was considered the top level of customization, or a crime by a few people, There were mainly, I think there were 2 or 3 Mercedes models only, so it was the very, very beginning of that time. And then he progressed from trying to individualize cars to working on the first engines, making his own first set of wheels, and so on and so forth. And it went from there.
It's interesting because I have a very similar story in the sense that at some point in my life, after my studies, I had to join a family business. It wasn't really a choice. It was like, so I was the only son at the time of my father's. He had a big business in Russia, based in Moscow. So when I moved back, he wanted me to, be part of that business. Our father figures, I guess, in a way, are, very progressive for their time. They're very successful, and being a son of somebody who's always, making decisions, and he's always right most of the time. It's always a challenge.
The problem is, the older you get, the more they are right. I discovered that about my father. When I was younger, I would challenge him a lot. And there's an argument to be made that, I say this a lot when I talk about succession or entrepreneurship in Germany. If you do not have children who are chasing you out of your own business with ideas, creativity, ambition, and who fight with you and who discuss with you, especially in father-son relationships, that is a very, there's gonna be a thunderstorm at some point. And there has to be. Because the most important thing in any business is, how do you transfer that spark of entrepreneurship, the tenacity that you need to be successful in business? How do you transfer that from one generation to the next? So if you have a son, or in our cases, or you have a daughter, who is only doing what dad wants, or mom wants, for that matter,
there's no longevity.
Then probability has it that he or she is not going to be able to lead the business. As you know, you need to be, if you want to lead a business into the future, you have to have ideas and you have to stand for them, and you have to be very persistent. It's not going to work if you're too peaceful, if you're too calm, if you're not outgoing. So clashes are a part of it, and I had many of them. Believe me.
At what age did you join your father's business?
I literally learned to walk in my father's workshop, the first workshop that we still own today. It looks different now, but it's still there. And I cannot remember a time, I honestly cannot remember a time when I was not part of the business. Of course, you're not, I don't want to sound arrogant, but then you're not part of the business when you're young. Officially, I joined the business when I was in 2006, when I was studying.
At what position? What was your job?
I joined in sales. But before that, I had practically done everything. My dad was he was a very typical patriarch, old school business guy, old school businessman, and he would make me do everything. It's like carry luggage, clean the yard, carry wheels, carry parts, work in logistics. He would send me abroad to different subsidiaries to do all kinds. I did everything, which I sometimes hated him for. Back then, but honestly now I can see 2 things. I can see that dads are right more of the time, more often than you think. So today I think that I don't know what's the mix of things that are still true, and what is the mix of things that I'm adding. probably we can say that 88, 70, 80% of what he was preaching, the fundamentals of business is still true. And maybe if I'm adding 10 or 20% of new things, then I think that is enough to lead the business into the future, because the fundamentals don't change, not really. And then I joined and studied in parallel, which was not, I was lucky and unlucky at the same time. It was not too far away. And so I would get calls 3 times a week, said, come by for a meeting, only one meeting, only 2 hours. And of course, I would never be 2 hours. I would stay for 8 hours, 10 hours at a time, which made my studies a bit longer. But the most important thing that I studied, the most important things that I learned from my father in our business. And sometimes, I don't know if that's the same case with you, sometimes I still have a lot of situations today where I'm doing something, or I'm negotiating something, or saying something. And in my own head, I'm thinking, you didn't put this on your hard drive yourself. This was something you learned. This was something you learned a long time ago by watching somebody who was your mentor.
And it's applicable to new projects.
Absolutely.
It's the strategy you can apply. And this is what I wanted to ask you. You know, when your father was, the head of the company, we remember the brand and its development and evolvement still around Mercedes and still around cars.
Yes.
If you're thinking about buying a home by the sea or making a smart investment, now is the perfect time to discover Seabreeze. For citizens of Azerbaijan, we offer a hybrid mortgage with rates starting from 7%, plus our 2x VAT promotion. For international buyers, there's an interest-free installment plans for up to 48 months with just a 10% down payment, available until August 31st. These offers are available for Garden Residence, Palm Beach, and Phase 1 of Prime Residence, 3 beachfront projects nearing completion. Use the promo code SBInvest26 to learn more about your personalized offer. See you at Seabreeze. When and how did you decide that you're going to go into motorcycles and boats, development, just spreading the wings and applying your brand to many other things?
That is a super interesting question, because I think it again concerns 2 generations. So my father started out of his grandfather's shop with Mercedes, worked on Mercedes all his life. I'm a fan of Mercedes, I will always be. That is one thing, but then I took over the business, and we had many discussions about the fact that customers were coming to us. They loved our quality. They were our customers. We had their phone numbers. They were actively asking us also, can you work on my Porsche? Can you work on my Range Rover? Can you work on other cars? So one thing is that the customers were coming to us and saying, can you also work on my fill in the blank? Also, I took over the business, and again, it was crisis mode. It was one of the hardest times in my life.
What year was that?
That was 2018. And it was exactly like everybody imagines it. It's the middle of the night, you're getting the call that nobody wants to get. And that call was your father is going to be transported to hospital. I didn't know it was a stroke back then, but of course I realized in the days afterwards. And he was in a coma for 4 weeks, and I had to lead the business. I was 34 at the time. I had just been put on the board of the company as the CMO, but of course I was very young. And you're having to deal with a personal situation, but then you can't, because in this situation you have to function, like in so many emergencies in life. And so I had to deal with the situation without knowing what was going to happen, whether he would survive, whether he would come back. And I remember a situation where I called my family and said, either I'm going to build a desk in an empty office space that we had at the time in a different building, or I'm going to sit at his desk tomorrow. What do I do? And all of them very clearly said at the time, if he survives, he's not going to come back. You're sitting at this desk tomorrow. It's time. And my problem was not that I couldn't be. My problem, I was not having a hard time dealing with the emotions at the time. I was having a hard time with not being a robot, with staying human, because you're shutting yourself off from this whole situation too much while people are coming into your office.
You can't digest the process because you have to be busy.
Exactly. People are coming into your office, they're realizing what the image immediately, and they're breaking down one after the other. 10 people, 20 people, 50 people, 70 people. And so it was a tough time, very tough time. And it took us about a half year until I think we had stability. And very quickly I realized, coming back to your original question, I realized that we had to ask ourselves one thing, because the identity of Brabus had always been Bodo Buschmann, the founder. Now that founder wasn't there anymore. So I was asking the team, who are we? Who do we want to be? And then they had all kinds of answers, but that were not real answers, including me. And I said, this is going to be our job for the next year. We're going to have to figure out who we want to be. And because only if we know who we want to be, we will know the way. And so we did that. The result of that process is still very, very important for us, because it is the mission of Brabus today. It is called Brabus 1 Second Wow. 1 second wow means every product we build, when you see it, it's the ultimate glance through the customer's eyes. When you see a product of ours, I want you to have an emotional reaction to it, recognize what it is, fall in love with it within 1 second. Because we're building luxury products. All luxury products have one thing in common. You are rewarding yourself with it, and they are working through the heart. They're never working through the head first. Emotional luxury products are here first. And that is why 1 Second Wow is the North Star. It is the absolute guiding mission of Brabus today. And now, what does 1 Second Wow not contain?
Tell me.
It doesn't contain Mercedes-Benz. It doesn't contain car. It opens up a whole new world of possibilities. And so combined with the customers that came to us, I was standing in front of our team at the time, and I think we did a little bit of a small reframing, just a small change of perspective that led us to see the company differently. Because I stood one day in front of our engineering and manufacturing team, and I said, guys, you can build prototypes, you can develop, you can build tools, you can make parts, you can go to the wind tunnel, you can put a number plate on it, you can test drive it. Why are you not doing? Brabus is a design house. You don't have to wait for the next S-Class to drop over the fence. We will still work on this, and we will for a long time, I hope. But we can do more. And so we started saying, what does a Brabus boat look like? What does a Brabus motorcycle look like? That is the whole perspective of how it happened. But also, frankly, when you're taking over a business, there is a time when you're walking in somebody's footsteps. It's a phenomenon that I call footsteps of a dead man. Imagine an empty field covered in snow, and you're walking in the footsteps of somebody who has bigger feet than you. Eventually you're going to get to a point, at least that's my experience, where those footsteps are either going to go in a direction that you don't want to go, or the footsteps will stop. And then you realize that you've been following them, even after that person was gone for a while, but then you have to start making your own decisions. And that is exactly what happened to me. And I said, I love what we do, but I think we can do so much more. And in the end, it has to be fun as well. So if I see that we can do it, and I see that there's potential, and I see the team's capabilities, why would we not try, you know?
100%. No, but I've been watching what you've been doing in the past years. And you know, last time you came to Baku, Azerbaijan, where we were checking out the location, I was presenting the project. We were driving in a golf cart, and you told me, Emin, you know what's my next idea is to create a Brabus golf cart. I said, that's such a crazy idea. Would you cut that?
I didn't.
It's such a
no, it
crazy,
is an idea. It's
such a crazy idea, because literally, you know, the golf carts are usually not up to the bar. If you want like a luxury golf cart, you can't find one.
It is just, honestly, it's an example. It's just an example of something that happens to me a lot. If you go through the world with open eyes, and you have a base. So I'm lucky to have I'm lucky to be the owner of an organization that is very, very good at design. So if I have that base, whatever it is, might be a large bakery, might be a large, by the way, very inspiring real estate development. You have a base, and then if you take that with you and you walk through the world with open eyes, and you train yourself to see things and to question things, then at some point you're almost going to have to fight new ideas. So when I walk through the world and I see things, that I'm always having new ideas. I can guarantee you one thing: in Brabus we will never run out of ideas. And so when I see products that in environments that should be of higher quality, I will ask myself, can I make one that's better? And nowadays, because we have removed the limitations of what we want to do, by the way, that doesn't mean we can do anything. There's a few things Brabus will never get involved in. The core of the brand will stay.
Baby
will be cars. Will be cars, and you shouldn't overdo it. But I think you know what I mean. So if you train yourself to be entrepreneurial, you will walk through the world and see new things constantly, and you can't avoid it. And that was one of those things.
So just to clarify, now everybody understands about cars. You're doing motorcycles, you're doing boats. What else?
We did the first Brabus motorhome, I think 2024. We have started building boats in about 2018, 2019. Motorcycles. We just also presented at Milan Design Week this year. A beautiful range of, we call it electric commuter bikes. It's a smaller category of motorbikes, fully electric, to help you move around the city. Very fun. Weighs half of what a traditional large motorbike would weigh, but has a different use case. We're adding. This year, you're going to see one or two more fun categories, especially in the water.
Awesome. You mentioned electric motorcycle. The world is changing, obviously, and there's always a debate: will electric cars overtake engine cars and whatnot? There's a lot of Chinese producers now that actually started making some quality, vehicles that became popular, and they're kind of chipping off the European market a little bit. Do you think Brabus would ever work with a Chinese car manufacturer?
We have been for a while. It's interesting. So first of all, it is of course a very, very interesting time in our industry. The world of cars in the last few years has been changing dramatically. I have an opinion about that, but let's first look into your question. We have been working with Smart, which is now a part of both Mercedes-Benz and Geely, for the last 25 years. I can only estimate it, but I think we have been building several hundreds of thousands of cars together across those more than 25 years. The ownership of Smart, at least partly, was transferred into a Chinese company, and now of course the cars are produced there. They are very good electric cars, different models nowadays. Just actually now I was in Shanghai, I think 3 weeks ago, the new #2, which is the successor of the original small Smart, was introduced, and it's coming back. And so of course the discussion about if and how we'll do a Brabus version of that will be very interesting, and a lot of people are looking forward to that. But for me that is a normality already. So the fact that the auto industry is shifting more towards Asia is a fact, because the EV movement is, I don't think you can stop it. It's not about stopping it. It's a very good technology that's getting better every year. The learning curves are high. I think that in the future we will see different segments in the market. You will have an EV, most likely at this moment. I do not have a glass ball. But most likely you're going to see a lot of EV applications in everyday mobility. But I also believe that you're going to see the combustion engine for longer, way longer than we think, especially in segments where buyers are buying a collectible, a timeless investment, or a piece of craftsmanship first. So especially in the segment that we are active in, I believe we're going to see either pure combustion engine cars or hybrids for a very long time.
I agree with you, and I think for Brabus, this is just an opinion of somebody completely unprofessional on the subject, as opposed to you. I think there's a lot of want a combustion engine Brabus moving vehicle.
It depends on what you're buying. I mean, when you're simply buying something that gets you from A to B, it's completely fine. When you're buying something that, let's say you want to maybe auction in 10 years or 15 years, or you want to keep for your collection, your motivation is completely different. And sometimes, especially in the media, people tend to polarize things too much. The reality is much more differentiated.
I want to talk about development a little bit. So when your customer gets into a Brabus product, or on top of the Brabus product, if it's a motorcycle, he is supposed to get all these different components of the way he perceives this product. When you translate that into development, what is the feel that your customer or future resident of your unit, apartment, or villa should receive when he sees a logo, Brabus?
It's an interesting question. Let's look at it again through the mission of Brabus 1 second while. If you look below, there's always a certain number of ingredients that we think we need to create that effect. The main one being, of course, the design language of the brand, but of course also the attitude and the soul of the brand. If you look at the Brabus Bodo, for example, it's, I think, a product, the latest car that we talked about. It's both elegant, classy, but it's also somehow a bit mean, a bit dark, very masculine, very modern, very progressive, and it combines classy elements and very contemporary elements. So of course, architecture is going to be modern. It is going to be, but it has to be, and that's also one of the key criteria for any Brabus product, it has to be functional and usable. Because we can never forget that Brabus is, at heart, an engineering company. So we're building things that work and translate it to development. First of all, it's a super interesting step to translate that design DNA and that design language to real estate, because it gives us new opportunity. That's why I love new segments. When we go from cars to boats, you have to look at it, you have to ask yourself, like, how can I create a Brabus boat that I put next to a car and people will recognize it comes from the same brand. The same is true from the boat to the motorbike. Then move on through a few categories to an apartment, a residence, a villa. You have to ask yourself the same question. Of course, I'm facing different materials, different spaces, different use cases than in an apartment, than in a car. And that is where I have the most fun designing these things, and I love that we get the chance to do this here at Seabreeze. It's fundamentally the same mission. 1 second wow, you have to walk in and you have to feel at home, and you have to recognize the brand if you're already a customer.
How do you describe and this is the analogy I want to make again between real estate and the car industry. Who is your customer for your main product, which is cars, motorcycles, and boats now? How do you portray that customer?
It's interesting. Of course, many people look at the very prominent examples of people that they know to be Brabus customers: sports stars, entertainers, celebrities around the world. 80% of our customers are, in some form or another, entrepreneurs, business people that have made a career, that have built a career one way or the other, in order for them to afford the product, because
it's not cheap.
It's not. Let's just say it this way: it's not cheap. We're quality. Somebody said that, mentioned that they thought Brabus was a quality first organization, and I took the liberty to correct them and said, no, Brabus is a quality only organization. And so that means we can't do cheap, but we can do good. And so the customers have to be able to pay for it, and they are mostly people who are serious business people from Europe, Asia, Americas,
United States,
Americas,
Russia,
the Middle East,
Azerbaijan,
literally anywhere in the world nowadays. And they are intelligent people. They have made their money. Most of them have absolute most of them have made their money through hard work, through diligence, and they're classy, elegant people. So they look at every product they buy, and they think very hard about the fact whether they should spend their money on it. It's one of my most favorite parts of my job. I get to interact with these people on a daily basis, and it's always inspiring personalities that you can learn from, no matter the industry, and that's the 80%.
And how would you portray your future residents in your Brabus developments, which are now, you've announced Abu Dhabi, which will be the first building.
Yes.
How many units?
Brabus Island Abu Dhabi is around 350 units. 350
units.
Located in Al Raha Beach, Abu Dhabi, UAE. And we're beginning the construction now. It's a beautiful project that we're doing with Reportage Properties in the UAE. So it's 2 phases, 4 high rises in the middle of the island, and apartments, villas, condos, and apartment buildings around it.
Your second development project happens to be in Azerbaijan.
Absolutely, and we're announcing it.
We're announcing it tonight. We have a big event, and it's very special, for us for this collaboration, because we think that the Brabus brand can turn the notch up for the entire development, because we have a lot of different brands that we are executing here, like the Noble Residence and the Cipriani Casa, and there's a Nikki Beach Hotel coming up, and Eli Saab, who is our friend as well. He's developing something on this territory. And Brabus is going to be an island. We already reclaimed it, so it's another Brabus island in Azerbaijan. And we think that this is going to take everything to the next level, because I've seen the project. Obviously, I've been involved in collaborating with all the partners to execute it. And even starting from the garage, which I want you to talk about. The garage looks like a workshop, right? I mean, it has the DNA of the brand. You actually enter a Brabus environment as soon as you park your car.
Exactly. So first of all, I have to say that I'm proud to be here in Azerbaijan. Everybody has been nothing but welcoming. Everybody has been ultra respectful, and everybody has shown tremendous friendliness towards my team, towards me. Everything I notice immediately. Everything is super clean. Everything is in order. Everything, especially in and around the city of Baku, it's a place that every time I come, I like to be here.
It's a really cool city.
It's a really cool city, it has a vibe like nothing I've ever seen, because it bridges Europe and Asia in a very fascinating way.
Yeah, contemporary and ancient. I mean,
absolutely,
it's like two worlds.
Unlike any other city that I've visited. So every time we come here, we feel good. Thank you.
We're going to keep it that way.
Absolutely. Proud that the second project we're able to do in real estate is here in Seabreeze, which is, of course, you cannot even say it's a normal real estate development. I think it's an inspiring, ambitious vision. And the first time I was here, when you showed me the initial presentation, the sheer scale of it is something that clearly global, and you can only explain it with saying that you are pursuing the task of building the future of Azerbaijan, because that is how big it is.
And you became part of that construction of the future of Azerbaijan.
I'm happy to see it, because of course also in Europe we could need that sort of ambition in a few places.
And tonight at the event, we have a lot of guests from all over the world. I know there's at least 50, 60 people that are flying over from Germany, that are the fans of the brand that want to see what we're doing and be part of this event. But I know there are people from Russia, from Asia, from the United States. We have, on our guest list, a very international crowd. And today we're going to present, I'll do my part where I present Seabreeze, just to put everything in a context. Yeah. And then you yourself will talk about the big idea, which is not an idea anymore. We're actually realizing it. We're starting construction.
Yes, I'm very thankful for Orkan and the team of SIG, who are our partners in this project. They have been nothing but professional.
Orkan is a great developer. He developed a few projects on the territory, including Marina Village, Ali Saab, and it was his initiative and idea, and that's how we met. And I think between all the partners, this is going to be a super success.
I appreciate them, because I have very simple values when it comes to business. Always long term, quality first or quality only, zero idiots. If I may put it that way. And Orkan, when I met him from the very start, he's very, very calm, very professional, representing both his company and I think the country and the region in a very, very good way. It's exactly the kind of partner that we need, and so I absolutely appreciate it, and I'm proud that we can be here.
Orkan, I underline everything Konstantin just said, so confirmed. Full stop. Konstantin, question. Your father was not as much of a public figure behind the brand as you became in the recent years. It's an opinion. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong.
Somehow it happened, yes.
And I realized, actually, after I met Donald Trump many years ago, we became quite close for some time. And before his presidency, he told me that we had this conversation. I was poking him around to see and find out how he thinks about his developments and his brand. And he gave me a suggestion which kind of stuck with me. He said, Emin, if you believe in your own business, you have to be the face of that business, and it will help you. And over the years, I became the face of Seabreeze because it was at some point became clear to me that through my social media, which was all about music before, no business at all, through my well-known persona in the region, it will help my business. It will help quicker explain what I'm doing, what I'm offering, what is Seabreeze, and why should you come here, why is it great, and so forth and so forth.
Yes.
Because the owner has a few advantages where you can deliver the information much quicker, considering the social media became so big now. And when did you make that decision in your mind that you will be the face of the brand, you will front it rather than take somebody that you would hire to be maybe better looking than both of us representing the brand? When did you make that decision?
It's interesting. I didn't know it at the time, but after my father passed away, I had a conversation with our press speaker at the time, and he quite literally said to me, the face needs a new brand, congratulations. And I didn't know what that meant, but because I thought there was so many stories to tell, I simply, in the beginning, I took my phone, because I had an Instagram account. I was the generation, I think I'm part of, as far as I know, I'm part of the first generation to use Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, all these things. Naturally, when I thought about how to tell the stories of the brand, I picked up the phone and started filming or saying things, telling stories about it. It was a natural transition, but inside of the company, people thought I was crazy. I've now gotten used to the fact, now it's actually the opposite. Now if people don't say I'm crazy, then I'm getting worried, because then you're not having new ideas. And so it simply went from there. And it turned out to be, it became clear that people are interested in seeing the reality behind a business, unfiltered, and delivered by, in the best case, the owner, because who can speak for his or her business better than the owner himself? And that's what I did. I deeply believe that social media is a gift for owner-led or private companies.
It's a free promotional instrument.
You can build your own reach. You can voice your own opinion on your own channel, and that is something everybody should take advantage of in a constructive way. Now, should everybody do it? I don't know. It's certainly become a part of things. The brand has become more popular at Brabus. We are communicating very, very openly, not only on Instagram, but also nowadays also on Amazon Prime Video with our own streaming show, which is called Brabus 1 Second Wow. Once again,
yes. And the show has longevity. You're filming new seasons.
Where things I can say now is it's very likely that it will continue.
Excellent.
The show was published in February of this year with a nice movie premiere. It was well received. The press was, we were lucky to get good press. And it turned out it's the same hypothesis then on social media. If you're telling real stories and you are open about how things work and you're open about it when things don't work, maybe you can inspire people, maybe you can spark conversations, maybe that you can have discussions that otherwise you wouldn't have. I think it's a beautiful tool, but also, of course, a part of it is that you're going to face controversy, you're going to be criticized, and
there's a downside.
There is a massive price to pay, but still, if I could do it again, I probably would do the same thing. I think that especially if you're buying an expensive product, especially if you're buying an emotional product, something again that you're rewarding yourself with, most people are interested in who's behind it, what's the story, why is it being built?
In today's world especially, people want to know.
So when I buy something, I'm interested in who's behind it. And so I think that creates an advantage that you have as an owner in a business that you can make use of. You don't have to, but in our case, we decided that we would.
I think that was the right decision. Watching from the side, I think if I want to find out anything about Brabus, I want to hear it personally from you. So, and through your social media, you can deliver that information instantly.
However, there's one thing that is super important to me in the whole discussion is the star of the show, whether it's on Amazon Prime Video, whether it's in the media in general, whether it's on Instagram, whether it's on Facebook, you name it. The star of the show at Brabus is Brabus. It's not me, it's not anybody else. The star of the show is
Yes,
and
Brabus.
will remain the brand. I think that is really, really important because the focus remains on building good products, delivering quality to clients, whether it's a residential product, a boat or a car. And the star of the show is not me. The star of the show is the brand.
Amazing.
That has to stay. It has to stay that way.
Now that we talk about cars, what music plays in your car?
What music plays in my car? I was born in '84, so you'll hear a lot of classic hip hop. You'll hear a lot of you'll hear some EDM, depending on the mood or the car I drive. But also, especially when it's vintage cars, classic cars, you'll hear soul. Sometimes classical music, jazz,
Elvis?
for the more relaxing things, rock and roll, absolutely. I love music and I listen to it all the time. I cannot imagine, honestly, a life without music. But
What system do you install in your
bound.
cars?
Sorry?
What system do you install in your
Oh,
car?
it really depends on the make and model. The one thing I enjoy the most is, of course, a part of Brabus is also a restoration department for old classic cars, like a 300 SL Gullwing, but also one of my absolute favorites, W111 S-Class convertible from the 60s.
Oh wow.
And especially in the old cabriolets, we are able to install hidden away sound systems that do not change the originality, but that give you modern Bluetooth connectability. So you can play music
Yeah, which you couldn't
in
have
a
done
top-notch quality as you would want to have it in 2026, but you're still in a vintage car. And I make use of that every summer, and I enjoy it every time.
Amazing. You have a special person in your life, your partner.
Yes, I do.
What role does she play in your life and in your business?
Millie and I work together. And we've decided to do so very early on. Today she's the creative director of Brabus. I'm the CEO and owner. And it's very, very interesting because most of the times you'll find that we walk into a room, listen, we're part of a meeting, and we'll come to a lot of the same conclusions, although using completely different means and channels.
And mind
capabilities.
strategy.
Absolutely. So she's a very, very creative person.
I met her, she's amazing. And I think, some of negotiations and conversations that she's having with your partners, well, at least this is what we see here in Azerbaijan, she handles her own way, her own part of the job.
Absolutely.
Separate from what you're doing, which is
very,
I'm
I'm
very effective.
I mean, her family is from Serbia originally, so I made the mistake of once looking at her and saying, "Oh, it seems like you're more Italian than German." And she looked at me and said, "Never say that again. Serbians are eating Italians for breakfast before 7 o'clock in the morning." And so she has a very strong will. She has a very strong personality. She knows exactly what she wants, and she brings real diversity into Brabus, which was a very male-dominant arena before. That is necessary, and sometimes it is uncomfortable, which makes it real diversity. Otherwise, it wouldn't.
Otherwise, you won't get there.
And she brings a lot of necessary new input. She bridges the gap between the automotive or design industry and things like fashion, entertainment, music. And so we're having a good journey together.
And I wish you the best journey for the next decades to come together.
Thank you very much.
And this is my next question. Where do you see the company in, let's say, 20 years? In 20 years.
Oh my God, I don't even know where I'm seeing myself in 2 years from now. It's like the speed at which everything's changing. So, we're not even discussing change at Brabus at the moment. We are discussing the rate of change. It's not the question anymore whether we will do new things and different things, or whether whether the brand is alive, or whether the brand has enough pulse. I think nowadays it was really, really interesting. We did the first boat, and people said we're a car company and we're going to disappear.
What do you know about boats?
Exactly.
They told you the same thing about motorcycles. What do you know about motorcycles?
So we did the first motorcycle, and people said, "Oh, people are going to crash." We did the first motorhome, and it went on and on and on, and people suddenly started to see that
maybe you know what you're doing.
they might have a plan.
You might have an idea.
And then we did, for example, also a fascinating event, one of the key events in the last 8 years. We did something called Brabus Signature Night, which was the first, which in the end turned out to be the first ever fashion show for cars. So cars on the runway instead of people, which ended up having a major impact on our brand.
Such a cool idea, though.
As you said before, in 2024 was the last one. We'll do one again, of course, for the 50th anniversary of Brabus, which is coming up next year. And we ended up with a lot of people online looking at the show and discussing about it. And so all of these points sort of trained everybody to the fact that we are going to be doing new things. We're going to be doing different things. And part of that is because I simply refuse to fit into a category or a genre. I don't think design has to fit in a category. If people say you're a car company, what does that say about us? It doesn't, you know, we can be creative in other.
No, you have a huge team of designers, engineers, so you can apply that to beautiful new ideas easily.
And it's,
in my opinion,
to be honest, it's fun. You know, why would I, if I see something, if I'm looking at a team that can do all these things, why would we not try to do different things?
Yeah, a dream team can achieve and accomplish anything.
We're still doing what we did, what we've done the last almost 50 years. You can still buy a set of wheels for your S-Class when your client in Australia, and we'll ship it to you. Absolutely no problem.
But you've been doing it for almost 50 years. That's done. But
it's a real way. Of course, you know, people expect that from us. We're doing it. But above and beyond, my responsibility is to develop the business. And, you know, don't forget that it's not only me, but everybody in the company is spending a lot of time of their life on this business, on this craft. So let's have fun, you know, let's build things together. Otherwise it would be, I don't know. I think I would be bored at some point.
No, for sure. And no, this creative process should never end, and especially that the team is there, it's assembled there, everybody's on a payroll. I mean, it's happening. So new ideas, and
Plus,
also diversifies marketing.
It's also, I think I have a responsibility to also push the company forward, push or pull, depending on how you see it, sometimes. Likely that in 20 years, we will not selling the same products that we are selling now. I mean, look at how it has developed. In Brabus, when we started, one of the main cars was the old 190E, so a smaller Mercedes-Benz at the time. Then it turned to bigger S-Classes. We were dealing mostly bigger S-Classes, SLs. Nowadays, it's the focus, at least, has shifted to SUVs and bigger cars. But then nobody knows where it's going to go in the future. The latest car
it's an ever-evolving, change.
Now the Bodo that we published last week is, people call it a Hyper GT, so a Gran Turismo. It's a 2+2, but it's, you know, a big coupe.
It's like 5.7 meters long.
5.07 meters.
That's crazy.
Very long coupe with kind of a long tail. Rear muscle car front. There's a lot of things going on. That is, again, not an SUV, which probably people would have expected from us if they look at the last 4, 5, 6 years. But the history of Brabus is way more than this. Nobody knows where it's going to go in the future. So being innovative, developing new products, developing new kinds of
and be responsive to ever-changing world.
It's
bounce off those ideas and
because
continue creating.
If you don't do new things, you're simply going to lose at some point.
Konstantin, how many people are working at the Brabus organization today?
We're in between 500 550 people at the moment.
How many worked 8 years ago?
To be honest, I don't have the answer from the top of my head. I think something like 200 people.
That shows your expansion.
It's
in 8 years,
200. See, I was right. Someone in the background. We've been fortunate to grow. I'm always telling the team that we have to be very, very respectful and grateful for what we have achieved. I believe that the minute you start lifting off from the ground, because you're having what people call a career or success, that is when the danger begins. You have to be...
keep your feet on the ground, always.
That's also, we're coming from the Ruhrgebiet, which is the North Rhine-Westphalia area of Germany, a big part of the industry, and Germany is located there. So it's a very down-to-earth region. I think that's a big part of the Brabus identity, and I'm always I'm always afraid of us getting carried away. And I refuse to let that happen, because I think it's,
That's the
I simply think,
subject.
it's bad business, you know? It's, you shouldn't do that, no matter how successful you are.
I agree.
Stay grounded, stay humble, stay grateful, because otherwise you're asking for bad karma.
For punishment.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Don't stick your chin
No.
up too much.
So there's this one, something I often talk about. There's this one old Porsche commercial where the young kid comes into a store, and then he asks to be, if he can sit in a car. I don't know if you know it. It's like a young boy, 5-6 years old. And then of course, they let him sit in the car. And people oftentimes talk about this advertisement, and they say that, the kid is so inspired, he's going to come back in 20 years. And then he's going to buy a car. And that's the rationale of how they talk about this very famous advertising. I use it to make a different point to our team. I always talk about it to them, and I say, guys, at Brabus, when a 5-year-old walks in, with or without his dad, and he could be boy or girl, and they ask to sit in a car, we're going to let them sit in a car, not because they're going to come back in 20 years and maybe buy something, but because we've been raised well. The only thing it costs us is a bit of time and oxygen. So just be humble, nice human beings, and let him sit in the car. It costs us nothing.
Nothing, yeah.
So let's behave.
With no incentive, yeah, and no plan.
Exactly. And that again, and that is important to me. Where if you lead a business that has your name on the door, I think it is very, very important to lead it values forward. There is no other way, because the normative side of things, how you deal with things, how you treat people in your company, around your company, suppliers, banks, partners, everybody around you, it will reflect, and it will reflect on you in a big way. And the most important conversation is always the one when you're not in the room. And sometimes people don't realize that.
For sure. Konstantin, first of all, thank you for this conversation. I think it was very honest and very open, and I really appreciate it.
Thanks for
and I think this is the reason we had this conversation, is to be transparent, honest about our plans, about your vision, about your future and your past. And I really appreciate the fact that the way you speak about your father, it's very respectful, it's very appreciative, and very honest. It's been how many? 8 years since your father passed away.
Yes.
8 years ago.
Feels like a lifetime.
Yeah, I'm sure it does. If you had a chance to have one conversation with your father today, what would you tell him?
I thought about this. To be honest, the last week when we published the car, it was a bit like having a conversation with him. And I think I actually don't think of it as a conversation. It's more of a question of what would he say, what would he think, what would he comment on the things that we're doing. I think he would understand that, first of all, I think he would be very proud of the team, not only of me, but there was many people who, again, Brabus is not one person, it's because one person cannot do what a brand like this can do. I think he would be very proud of what we've achieved in the last 8 years. I think that he would say, you're exactly as crazy as I was back in the days. And I think that he would recognize that some things never change. You still need courage to make decisions, and you still need values, the right values to create good partnerships and pay wages long term. That simply doesn't change. He had one cool metaphor for entrepreneurship that I really love. He always said it's, the boards at a swimming pool. There's different levels.
Yeah, different levels.
And he would always say that in business, you're going to have to jump from the 1 meter board every day, and you're not going to know if there's water in the pool. And about every month or every quarter, you're going to have to jump from the 3 meter board. Sometimes there's water in the pool, sometimes less, sometimes it will hurt, sometimes it won't. Sometimes in your career, you're going to have to jump from the 5-meter board, and very few times from the 10-meter board. And when you're standing on the 10-meter board and it's freezing cold and wobbly, and you're looking down, there's going to be two things that are true. One is that around the pool, there's going to be 100 people who are yelling up at you, trying to tell you how much water there is. I mean, everybody has a different opinion. Actually, three things. Secondly, none of them have to jump or have ever jumped. And third, the only way to find out is
to jump.
Is to jump. And I think the Bodo once more proved that that is true. No matter how big a business gets, and people forget that the risks grow with it. It's not only one side of the balance sheet that's growing; the other side is growing too.
Always.
And a very, very good friend of mine once told me what he considers the most interesting KPI, which is TTB, time to broke. The fun fact being that it's always the same, because as revenues grow, risks grows. The bigger your balance sheet, the higher the liabilities.
Nothing changes.
Nothing changes because your projects grow, as you know very well. Your projects grow, your risks grow, and you have to get up every morning and treat it with the same respect, the same diligence,
regardless of the scale.
Regardless of the scale, because if you go off the gas pedal, if you let go, it's going to affect your business, no matter whether it's thousands, millions, billions.
Regardless of the scale.
That is never going to change.
Konstantin, again, thank you very much. And just my personal opinion, I think your father should be really, really proud of you and
thank
what
you very
have
much.
accomplished.
I appreciate that.
And I absolutely love to watch people through generations to be able to take the business to the next level. With no disrespect to the previous generation, but with the appreciation to the previous generation. Say that, when you're younger, it's easier to see certain things and to have a vision and to have the strength and inspiration to actually take it a notch.
And maybe sometimes you're also naive and stupid enough to just go for it. You know?
Exactly.
That's a big part of it, I think.
Exactly. Take a risk. And unexperienced enough to actually make that step forward. But sometimes those steps bring us incredible success, which I wish for the next decades to come for you, and we'll do things together. And again, welcome to Azerbaijan. We're going to have a great event today.
Thank you very much for having us in this beautiful place.